Konami is doing something absolutely crazy. Now, you probably already heard the news, but just in case you haven't, a bunch of mischievous cards that cause chaos in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are now coming back to the Master Duel scene, most of which Master Duel has never even seen before. But why were these cards banned in the first place? And what might they do when they come back? First up, we have Knightmare Mermaid. But why did Knightmare Mermaid even get banned in the first place? Well, it all has to do with a deck called Orcust. Now, Knightmare Mermaid can be summoned using one Knightmare monster, and it has the effect that when it is summoned, you get to discard a card to summon another Nightmare from your deck. Now, there is an Orcust card with Nightmare in it because their lore actually combines. But this Orcust card that has Nightmare in it is basically Foolish Burial while it's in the graveyard. So as long as you could make this, you could go into the full Orcust combo. Now, this doesn't sound so bad because it is an archetype locked monster, right? You need to make a Nightmare before you can go into this. However, all the Nightmare cards, all the other ones, are just generic link monsters. So as long as you have any two monsters with different names, you can go into this combo, right? So your deck can do its thing. As long as it has two cards at the end of the combo, it can go into the full Orcust stuff. It can even pivot into some Phantom Knight stuff as well to get some extra negates. So yeah, this card goes absolutely crazy. Now, there are cards in the OCG and TCG right now that are basically doing the same thing, and those are known as the Fiend Smith cards. In fact, as far as I know, these are even better. However, these are so good that they've actually received hits in both formats. The OCG has two cards here, I think, and the TCG actually has one of their cards banned. In fact, these cards even got another generic monster, Beatrice, banned as well. And I'm predicting when this deck comes out, it will probably come out pre-hit, just like Terra Elements and just like Tempest. So, as for what Knightmare Mermaid will do when it comes to the game, that is a strong indication that it might actually be too strong yet again. But you know, we will have to see, of course. The Orcust combo does dark lock you, right? So it does lock you a little bit, but there are still plenty of options. And I think this is going to become a strong engine in the future. Now, on to the next one. We actually have another Knightmare monster, Knightmare Goblin. Knightmare Goblin. Now, Knightmare Goblin was actually banned in Firewall format. And if you don't know what this is, this was kind of like the worst part of Yu-Gi-Oh's history, where things were kind of transforming into the modern Yu-Gi-Oh we know today. However, there weren't that many counter cards, and Konami was not putting as many limitations on cards as they do right now, right? So we would just have these insane wombo combo cards, and one of them was actually Knightmare Goblin. Now, what this does is that if it's summoned in a way that it is co-linked, you can discard one card and draw one, but you also get an extra normal summon. Now, normal summon effects are some of the most powerful effects in Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Because normal summons are one of the few restrictions that you have to abide by in this game, right? You only get one normal summon, so Konami figures, you know, better make that count. But with Knightmare Goblin, you actually get two, so you have the potential for two strong effects. And normally, normal summon effects do not have once per turns built into them because a normal summon is already a once per turn kind of thing, right? So this becomes extremely abusable. Now, the main reason this got banned, right, is Firewall Dragon. And we do not have Firewall Dragon at full power. We do have it back, but it's been errated to work a bit differently. Before, you could just summon as many things from the hand as you wanted, but now it is a lot different. So I don't think that Knightmare Goblin is going to have the same power that it used to, especially since nowadays Konami is not really focusing on the link summoning mechanic as much, so there aren't as many decks today that want to naturally pull off that co-link. Okay, a quick sidebar. Turns out Knightmare Goblin can be used while it doesn't have the co-link, it just doesn't get the draw out, which I mean is badly written, but yeah, that's the case. And honestly, Knightmare Goblin is more powerful than I thought it was, but you know, the final thing still stands, right? I think it's just gonna make wombo combo decks more combo-y, and the regular stuff isn't really going to change that much. But the next card up was definitely used in regular gameplay. In fact, it is one of the easiest out of all the things here to summon, and that is Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, right? Why was this card such a terror? Because, you know, at first it looks like this card is not really that bad, right? It requires a Dark Magician and a Red Eyes Black Dragon or Dragon Effect monster to actually make it. And I have to say, by itself, it is not that much of a toxic card. It does have a specific requirement, which means the decks that can summon this naturally are very few, right? And they always usually come with some kind of sacrifice. Now, you could hard draw Red Eyes Fusion if you want, but that card has a clause on it that you cannot summon for the whole turn before and after you use the Red Eyes Fusion, which means you'll basically be summoning Dragoon and maybe normal summoning, and that's it. And don't get me wrong, Dragoon is a strong card, but it can't really match up to the disruption that we can put up today all by itself. That's where another card comes in that I think really should have been banned a long time ago and is banned in every other format except for Master Duel, and that is Predaplant Verte Anaconda. Now, Anaconda has an effect that can copy a fusion card from the deck, right? And Red Eyes Fusion is a fusion card, so you can directly copy its effect from the deck. But you know, Red Eyes Fusion has a condition on it that you can't summon before you use it. So how on earth can Verte copy it? Well, Verte, a bit like cards like Diamond Dude and Transaction Rollback, they only copy the effect. They don't copy the cost, and they don't copy most of the conditions, right? And unfortunately, Verte can be made using any two monsters. Now, it does have its own condition that you cannot summon after you use the Verte, but at that point, it's already too late, because you can make your whole board and just leave behind two monsters. Then you link someone into Verte, and you can stack Dragoon on top of your fully made board. That's what makes this card so toxic, right? Also, if your opponent has hand traps like Imperm, Ash Blossom, Effect Veiler, none of these actually remove cards, right? So if your combo gets shot down by hand traps, you can turn your useless monsters into Verte and make another push for Dragoon. And at that point, usually your opponent is going to be down on cards because they've used those hand traps, and they're not going to have enough to combat the Dragoon as well. This is how Dragoon completely terrorized the OCG formats. However, it wasn't as good in the TCG, and that's because when it released in the OCG, there weren't as many things to combat it, right? Because this thing can't be destroyed by card effects, and it can't be targeted. However, when it released in the TCG, they made sure to release some cards that could actually combat this menace, right? We had Dark Ruler No More, and we had Forbidden Droplet, both of which do not target or destroy, but can shut down Dragoon. And guess what? We have those kind of cards in Master Duel right now, right? We have the Dark Ruler No Mores, the Forbidden Droplet, but we also have Triple Tactics Talent, which can again remove the threat of Dragoon without targeting or destroying. So, while I don't think Dragoon is going to be as strong right now in Master Duel as it was back in the OCG, I do think this is still going to be a problem card because of those same reasons why it was still kind of an issue in the TCG, right? You can still make it extremely easily, you just need two monsters, and it can still be used as an extra push through hand traps if you go first. Now, there are some downsides to Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. First being that you do need to play 3 bricks for it, right? You need to play Dark Magician, Red Eyes Fusion, and yes, you do have to use the actual Red Eyes Black Dragon. You can't cheat it by using a Dragon Effect monster. Even though it doesn't say it on the card, you do have to use the material that is listed. And you know, in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, bricks are getting worse and worse and worse, right? You really do want to be tightening down on the bricks, right? You don't want to add 3 more. So I guess that's why Konami thinks that this can come back, right? But the DPE engine, which is very similar to this, still has cards on the ban list, right? It still has that draw 2 part, which made it so great, banned. So to me, that indicates that Dragoon is not really going to be a fair card. It's going to do exactly what it did before. While it may not be as powerful in comparison, I think it is still going to be an issue for those exact same reasons. And this is not the only nigh invulnerable monster that is coming off of the ban list. Masterpiece, the true Draco slaying king, is actually coming back to the game. Now, I've never seen Masterpiece in action before. Now, in my opinion, it doesn't look as bad as Dragoon is. However, I think people hated this one way more because of the decks it also went into. Right, now, let's go over this thing's effect. First of all, this is a card that you tribute summon. However, you can tribute summon this by using continuous spells and traps as well, right? So in that way, it kind of cheats around the materials of the tribute summon mechanic. But the best part about this card is that it's unaffected by the type of card, monster, spells or traps that you use for its tribute summon, right? So if you do use a monster and a spell, this thing becomes nigh invulnerable, even more invulnerable than Dragoon. And also, this has another effect of being able to banish a continuous spell trap from your graveyard to destroy one other card on the field. And of course, you probably used a continuous spell or trap to summon this, so you are basically gonna have cards for this effect at all times. Right now, I don't think this is as good as Dragoon's discard to negate effect. Right now, I know I didn't mention it, but yeah, Dragoon also has a secondary effect that can negate something, and I don't think this effect is as good as that effect. But I think the reason people hate this card more than they seem to hate Dragoon is because Dragoon can go in anything, right? So you can expect it. However, Masterpiece specifically fits into decks that are already not fun to play against. Right now, we have true Dracos out. True Dracos right now are mainly centered around continuous floodgates, right? And that's something you never really want to see. And I think that Masterpiece being in the game encourages people to play those kind of decks, right? Those kind of floodgatey, no fun decks. Now, apparently, there are versions of the true Dracos which were not as floodgatey, but I think we all know at this point that Masterpiece is just going to go into a floodgate style deck, because those are the decks that can really make maximum use out of Masterpiece, right? Those decks that already have a bunch of continuous cards in them. There is a way we can kind of get some insight onto how Masterpiece is going to affect Master Duel, and that's because Masterpiece has already come out in the OCG. So let's see what's actually being used in. Let's see some of that deck history. Nothing. Nothing is using this card. So yeah, based on that, I don't think we have anything to worry about from the Masterpiece. I'll be honest, when the OCG had that ban list, I was kind of scared, but you know, now I'm a bit more calm. I don't think Masterpiece is going to do that much. However, I do think it will give a relevant boost to Draco Slayers, right? Actually making that deck a bit more powerful. Even though I'm a bit calmer about Masterpiece coming back, this next one has a special place in my heart. Ib the World Chalice Justicar. Now, when this got banned, I'm sure everyone was praising it, bro. I hate this card with a passion. And even right now, I think this is the most toxic of all the cards that I've mentioned, right? Because there's one feat that only Ib can lay claim to, and that's the fact that none of the others had decks solely dedicated to maximizing the usefulness of this one card alone, right? Like, the closest ones were Knightmare Mermaid and Masterpiece, and you know, even in decks that ran Masterpiece, for example, you had other options that would support the Masterpiece, right? It wasn't just summon Masterpiece and sit on it the whole time. And again, Knightmare Mermaid, even though this did set off a lot, those decks weren't really maximizing the usefulness of Knightmare Mermaid. Knightmare Mermaid was kind of just like a link into the Orcus deck. However, when this card was in the game, I saw decks, I used decks that would solely revolve around resolving and maximizing the usefulness of this one card. But you know, what does this card do, right? It uses 2 monsters to make itself, so that's a -1. But already on the surface value, it gets you 2 different things, right? So this is just a +1 whenever you get to it. However, the things that this card goes into give you further pluses, right? there were decks that, I'm not joking, solely revolved around making this thing with a normal dragon tuner, because this, combined with the guard dragon things at the time, was basically able to get you anything that you wanted in the game, right? Including going into Cyberstein. This was essentially the do-it-all combo card of its time, right? It's kind of like, you know, Hauke Fibrax or Auroradon in that respect. And it's kind of ironic, since its would-be synergy with those cards was essentially what landed it on the ban list in the first place, right? Because back when this thing existed, the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh! Were different. We were in Master Rule 4. And for those of you who don't know what Master Rule 4 was, because it was quite a few years ago, essentially every extra deck card, including Synchros, Fusions, and Exceeds, were locked to the same link zones that link monsters are, right? If you played with link monsters, you know that you can't just summon them anywhere. You have to use the extra monster zone. Then you had to use zones that a link monster points to. Well, when links came out, everything was locked in exactly like that, and link monsters were really the only cards that could expand those zones, right? So if you made that a synchro in the extra monster zone, you wouldn't be able to make any other extra deck monster unless you used that same synchro. However, when Master Rule 5 came about, I think they realized, yeah, some of the cards that we have are gonna be way too broken. And so they banned a bunch of cards, and it was one of those cards that got caught in the crossfire, and thank gosh that it did. But now it's actually coming back. Now, what do I think the effect of IB is actually going to be on the current meta? Well, I think that bot decks are probably going to find a way to abuse this somehow, right? Because this is again just a wombo combo enabler. However, the guard dragon cards that this card paired with are not in the game anymore, right? So you can't use the exact same combos, although you can still go into some crazy stuff. There's still a +2 which gets you like a Monster Reborn and blah blah blah, but the cards that you used to go into, right, which were completely broken, the guard dragon that summons anything from the extra deck for free, the guard dragon that summons any dragon from the deck, those are both banned, and thank gosh they are, right? So I think that IB is not going to cause as much chaos as it did in those other places, but I still think it's a bad idea to bring this back, right? I think this just enables more wombo comboing, and that's what people don't like about this game, right? People don't like the fact that some decks can just go on forever and ever, and this is again another generic card which allows you to go on forever and ever and ever. So overall, I don't think it's going to like break the game or anything, but I do think that it was a bad idea to bring this back. Okay, another quick sidebar. I just looked at what it was being used in, and yeah, it's being used in the exact same way it was being used before, in wombo combo decks to build up an insane amount of advantage. Who could have guessed it? Now, on to the next card, and it's a card that actually pairs with another one that we've seen so far, Masterpiece, right? This card is Dragonic Diagram. Now, this is the only one of the cards that wasn't banned before this announcement, right? This one was actually at 1, and I think the reason for this is, again, True Dracos back in the day were way too strong, and this ended up getting banned. Also, the OCG had an error where they realized, okay, field spells are getting way too powerful, and this was one of those field spells that ended up on the chopping block, right? Now, of all of the cards that are coming out, I think this one has the least potential, mainly because it wasn't great in as many things, right? It had 2 decks that this thing was really good in, right? It was good in True Dracos for obvious reasons, right? It searches any True Draco thing, and it was good in Dinosaurs, right? And why on earth was this good in Dinosaurs? Because of the Earth True King monster. The Earth True King can look at your opponent's extra deck and then rip 3 key cards out of it. Dinos likes to blow up their babies, and all their babies are Earth monsters, right? So the Earth True King, which could blow up 2 cards to summon itself, fit perfectly in that deck. Now, if the Earth True King is going to be good in your deck, then Dragonic Diagram, which is able to search the Earth True King, is going to be excellent in your deck, right? Because again, it blows up a card to get a card that blows up more cards, right? So if your deck likes things being blown up, then you would have definitely wanted to consider the Dragonic Diagram. Now, all this being said, however, this one I think has the least potential of all of the other cards right now. It does help True Dracos a lot, right? So True Dracos with the Dragonic Diagram and Masterpiece might be somewhat playable now, but again, there really is no evidence for this, right? If you check out the OCG, it has both of these cards already, and it's not that great. Now, to be fair, from what I'm looking at, the OCG only has one copy, and I don't think that Masterpiece is actually a searchable card. You basically have to draw into it, which I guess is another reason why people hate this card, right? But personally, based on these results, I don't think it's going to change much right now. This is the first format that has brought Masterpiece back to 3, so it might be good. And also, Master Duel is a best of 1, right? So I guess Masterpiece has more chances to shine in Master Duel than any other format. True Dracos actually has to be banned from most festivals because while it doesn't follow the spirit of any of those festival decks, it's pretty cheap and it has the ability to compete with most of those decks, which means True Dracos may actually be playable. So what I think is going to happen is that True Dracos is going to get a wave of players because it is a very, very cheap deck. So you may be seeing Masterpiece, right? It may get a little bit cooked. However, I think it is going to die down after a little while. But you know what? I haven't actually experienced most of the cards here, right? I've never experienced Knightmare Mermaid or Knightmare Goblin, and I've never really experienced Masterpiece. So if I got something wrong, please tell me in the comments below, because you know, I like my videos to have accurate information, whether it's in the video itself or whether it's thanks to your contribution in the comment section. So I hope to see you in the next one, and goodbye.